Hi, and welcome to another video in Google Cloud Platform Product Spotlight series. In this video, we're going to cover one more product of Google Cloud Platform, or GCP for short, which is Google Cloud Storage. So let's get started. So Google Cloud Storage is basically an object store which Google provides. So if you read the tagline, it says object store for companies of all sizes, store any amount of data, retrieve it as often as you would like. So what is an object store? So basically an object store is, as the name says it, you store objects, you give an object to the storage service and it stores it somewhere. And then when you ask for the same object via certain API, it gives you back that object, right? There is no notion of a file system. So for example, you cannot run an operating system based on Google Cloud Storage. So it's basically an object store. But it has been built to mimic the file systems that we all are, habitual of using, be it Linux file system, be it Windows file system, the NTFS and ext4, the folder structure, the directory structure, the nested directories and files. Right? It is made to mimic that, but it is not in any sense any traditional file system. Right? It has constructs of buckets. So basically you create a bucket and within each bucket, you can create as many objects as you want. And you can create as many buckets as you want as well. They just have to have unique names all across, and not just in your project, they need to have globally unique names. Yeah, you can have as many buckets, and within each bucket, you can have as many objects as well. So that's like a very, very high level overview of cloud storage. If we come to the features of Google Cloud Storage, it is really, really fast. The insertion and retrieval speed is really, really blazing fast. You can read a report which Google shares with you. You can come here and you can read that report. It is highly available because your data is basically replicated in different availability zones, and depending on what storage class you choose or what storage type you choose, your data is also replicated to multiple regions as well. So as we will move forward in the video, and we will do a hands-on as well, that you can create your bucket in a single region. You can create your bucket in dual region, or you can create your bucket in multi-region, setting. And depending on which option you choose, your availability numbers vary. And then within each setup, you have different storage classes as well, depending on how fast you want to access the data, how frequently you want to access the data, so on and so forth. We'll cover all of that in storage classes, right? There is also a premium feature which Google Cloud Storage provides, which is called turbo replication. So as I mentioned, that Google Cloud Storage by default replicates your data, but that replication doesn't have an SLA, right? It might take 20 minutes, it might take 5 minutes, it might take 3 minutes for your data when you copy it in one region, because by default you'll be uploading your data in one region, and even in that one region you'll be uploading it to one availability zones. Behind the scenes, Google will replicate it to all the availability zones, and if it's a dual region bucket, then it will replicate it to the other region as well, and if it is multi-regional, then it will replicate it to multiple region as well. But there is no SLA to that, right? You cannot sue Google that you took 1 hour to replicate my data. So that's when turbo replication, which is a premium feature, which is a paid feature, you will have to pay money for that. Google gives you SLA guarantee of 15 minutes or less to replicate your data in whatever regions you have, right? So that's turbo replication. We will look at it in detail when we will move forward. Then we have the Google Cloud Storage is highly, highly durable. It provides you 11 nines of durability, which essentially means once the data is copied to the Google Cloud Storage, there is a very, very, very less chance that you lose that data. So if you read this particular article, which says how Google Cloud delivers 11 nines of durability, it's a very, very good article from engineering perspective, so you should definitely give it a read. But it says that what does 11 nines of availability means? It means that if you have 1 billion objects in 100 years, you won't lose even a single file, right? So that's what 11 nines of durability guarantees you. So that's why it's a very popular choice for storing your files. Plus it is cheap. We will see when we'll discuss the pricing that it is very, very cheap to store data in Google Cloud Storage. So these are some of the major highlights of the features or the functionality that Google Cloud Storage provides. And now we will move over to the next section, which is like, what can you use this object store for? So you can practically use it for anything. You can store your video data. So for example, you can store your video files. So maybe like we don't know that, but you can create a service like YouTube, and you can basically store all of your video files on Google Cloud Storage, and then you can serve it from there. And you can create a multi-regional bucket where you store that file, and depending on from which region your customers are accessing those files, they can be served from the nearest region as well. So that's one thing. You can use Google Cloud Storage to fulfill your data processing needs. For example, you might be using Apache Spark via Dataproc, and you can store the data, that batch data, into Google Cloud Storage, because by default, the services like Dataproc or Dataflow, they provide connectors to read from Google Cloud Storage. So it is very, very fast, and it's very, very cheap. So these are some of the use cases where you can use Google Cloud Storage. You can use it as a file store as well, like drop-in replacement for NFS kind of services. Although Google has an NFS service as well, which is called Google File Store, but you can modify your applications if you have that capability. If you don't want to do a lift and shift, if you want to move from an NFS kind of storage, you can pretty much use Google Cloud Storage as well there as well. So now we come to a part of Google Cloud Storage, which is known as storage classes. Right, that's the first thing that we will discuss about. So storage classes is basically a demarcation to denote that what is the access pattern for my data, and like what's the access need of this data. So if you come down, you have basically 4 storage classes. So one is standard storage classes, one is nearline, the other one is cold line, and then the archival storage, right? So by these names, it must be somewhat clear, right? So standard storage classes is by default which starts, right? Whatever object you are storing, it will come in the standard storage class. There is no minimum storage duration. You can store it for 1 minute. You can store it for 100 years. It doesn't matter. You will pay for the time for which it is stored. The typical availability of standard storage class is if you are in a single region, then it is 4 nines of availability. And if you are in dual region or multi-region setup, which we will cover in our hands-on section, then it is even greater than 4 nines of availability. The next one is nearline storage. It has a minimum storage duration of 30 days. So if you move your data from standard to nearline and you delete it in 1 day, you will still pay for 30 days of storage, right? So that's what the minimum storage duration means. So nearline has slightly less availability, which is 99.95 if you are multi-regions and dual region, and 99.9, which is even lower than multi-region. And so it's for cold line, and so it's for archive storage. So the way these classes are made is, you can read more about them, what each storage class is and what it is good for. But I'll give you a general idea. When your data is new, when your data is fresh, it is in standard storage classes, right? You do not have to pay money to retrieve that data, and you can access as many time as you want. But as you move from standard storage class to nearline, to cold line, to archive, you are essentially, basically, as data gets old, its usage or its access pattern changes. Usually, the more recent data is accessed more frequently, and as the data ages, the accessing that data becomes infrequent. And as the name suggests, archive, it is just basically an archive, maybe backup, right? You might never access it. You are just backing up your data, that in case of a disaster or in case you lose some data, you can back it up. So as you move from standard to archive storage, that's how you move from standard to nearline to cold line and archive storage. And there is, as we discussed, there is a object lifecycle management, a feature which is provided by Google Cloud Storage, in which you can move your data based on its date from one storage line to another storage line, right? So for example, you can create a policy in OLM, which is Object Lifecycle Management. You can create a policy which says that after 30 days, move your data from standard to nearline, right? And then after 30 days from nearline to cold line, and after 90 days from cold line to archive, right? That way your data will automatically move from different classes. And as you progress from standard to archive, the storage price goes down. The availability goes down, but storage price goes down as well. And there is one extra thing that comes into play, which is that from nearline to cold line to archive, you have to pay money to access that data, right? Because Google expects that since you have moved your data from standard to Nearline to Coldline and archive, you'll be accessing that data infrequently. So you'll have to pay some money to access that data. So that's the motivation behind different storage classes. So by default, you will start with the standard class, which has the highest availability, which is 4 nines, and depending on which setup you choose. But yeah, it is still even if your bucket is in a single region, you will still have 4 nines of availability, right? And you can read the different features that are available within each of the storage classes. But the as the name says, that archival storage is just basically backup. It is the high, like the retrieval cost from archival is the highest. It's slightly less in Coldline, even less in Nearline, and it is free in standard storage. So those are the different storage classes. And object lifecycle management helps us to move an object from one storage class to the other storage class. So that's the storage classes. Now, in this one, we discussed we have a bucket in a single region, we have bucket in dual region, we have bucket in multi-region. So let us understand what does that mean. So we will go to the bucket location. So this is that feature. So your bucket could be region specific. So let's say it's stored in Sao Paulo. So there are three concepts, right? Regional, dual regional, multi-regional. So your bucket could be specific to a single region. So for example, I'm from India. I stay near Delhi. So maybe I just keep my data in the Delhi data center. That's it. So that's just regional specific. I could keep it in dual region. So a region pair, and the regional pairs are within the same continent usually, or like very close. So for example, Delhi data center and Mumbai data center, I can keep it in dual region. So even if Delhi data center goes down because of some network issue, or let's say an earthquake or any natural calamity, god forbids that, but so in that case, Mumbai region can serve my traffic. When it comes to multi-region, it's like vast geographic area. You can have your data in multiple geographic places, multiple continents. So I might be keeping my data in Asia region and US region and EU region all together, right? A multi-region is basically a large geographic area. So that's how you can keep it. And all the cloud storage data is at least kept in two zones, two availability zones within each geographic location, within each region, basically, right? I should not use these words interchangeably. So by default, as I mentioned, there is a replication. So it is replicated in at least two of the zones. Then you have turbo replication. As I mentioned, that turbo replication just adds an SLA to this replication feature, which is 15 minutes or less, basically based on your availability needs, your latency needs, and where your customers are located. You will choose either regional bucket, single region bucket, dual region bucket, or multi-region bucket. As we learned in the previous section, that the availability moves up if you go from single region to dual region to multi-region. So if you have higher availability needs, you will definitely choose multi-region or at least dual region. So let's do a small demo. So when you create a bucket, right, let us go to the Google Cloud console, and if you go from left, you will go to the storage, Google's cloud storage, and in that you go to browser, and here you will see I don't have any bucket as of now. Let us create a bucket. So I will create a bucket. I will name it as, let's say, I will name it with my project name, because that is basically unique. I might get that this is not available. Okay, so it says, yeah, it is available. I will do a continue. Now here it is asking you to choose a location type. It is asking for multi-region. So I can store it in multiple region in US, I can store it in multiple region in EU, and I can store it in multiple regions in Asia. So if I'm storing it in Asia, it might breach the boundary of a country. So from in Asia, you have storage in you have data centers in Indonesia, India, Japan. So it might be kept in multiple regions there. Now you have dual regions. You can choose dual region as well, and in dual region you have turbo replication as well. So it's not available for multi-region because it's already like it's inherent, but in dual region you can add a turbo replication to make sure that the data is available in both of the region under 15 minutes. And in location, you can choose Americas. So you can choose multiple regions, like you can choose which two regions you want. Similarly, EU and then Asia Pacific. So you can choose in Tokyo and let's say Osaka. So if you choose in Tokyo, you can't go Singapore. These are some of the constraints which you can obviously see when you are selecting it. Or you can choose a regional, and in here I can store it anywhere. So maybe I want to store in Delhi, right? And that's how you move forward. Then you continue, then you choose the default storage class. So by default, it starts with standard. You can start with Nearline or Codeline or Archive, because maybe you are creating a bucket to create the backup of your on-premise data. So you can start with Archive, but generally you start with standard. And then how do people access it? What people have access to this? So you can have you have two kind of controls. One is uniform, which is basically a bucket policy. You will apply bucket policy, the policy at the bucket level, and whatever policy you'll apply at the bucket level will be inherited by all the objects within the bucket. Or you can have a fine grained control, which is like per object ACL, which is access control list. Then now it asks you about object versioning. So basically, none means you just have one version. Object versioning is basically if you delete an object or you overwrite an object, the older version of those objects are not deleted. They are kept for recovery. You can always recover that data. If I take an example of, let's say you are using Terraform and you are using GCS to store the state file, and the state is modified by somebody, and now this the state is all messed up. But if the versioning is enabled, what you can do is you can restore to the previous state of that object. We will see an example of that. So I will just enable that. So you will keep one version per object, and then after 7 days your older version will be expired. So you can increase this to 15 days or 30 days depending on your need. But bear in mind that when you are storing two versions of your data, you are essentially paying double the cost for those 7 days, right? By the time the both versions are alive, you are paying for you are basically paying for both of the copies of the data. Another one is the retention policy. If you want to delete the data based on compliance. So for example, in a lot of social networking companies, you can only keep the user data for, let's say, 30 days, and you don't want it to be a manual process to delete the data after 30 days. You basically can add a retention policy that once a file or once an object becomes 30 days old, you delete that object, right? So that can also be done. So right now I'll just keep it on object version. And then you have a data encryption. So by default, your data is encrypted at rest and in motion as well. But the keys are managed by Google. Google doesn't know the keys. So that means Google cannot read your data. But it is still Google managed. So if you have a higher need of security, you can use the customer managed encryption key as well. We are choosing the Google managed encryption, and you create the bucket. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly fire up the Cloud Shell, and I'm going to give you a small demo that like how the versioning and how do you interact with the Google Cloud Storage. So like there are multiple ways to interact with Google Cloud Storage. One is via the REST API, which Google provides. You interact it with JSON. Another one is a command line tool called GS Util, which is Google Storage Util. And the other way is using SDKs. So if you go into Google and you see GCS SDK, you will see a lot of client libraries which are supported. So you have different language support there. You have C++, C#, Go, Java, Node.js, PHP, Python, and Ruby. So you have a lot of languages supported there. And you can check out the reference here. There is a GSUtil tool, there is an XML API, and then there is a JSON API as well. So in this particular demo, we will see and use the GSUtil tool. It comes pre-installed in your Google Cloud Storage. So when the first time you'll be using it, it will ask you to authorize. So just click on authorize, and it will do that. Yeah. So the tool is already installed. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a file called demo.txt. And I will say, hi, this is version 1 of this file, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to exit it. Now I am going to copy it. So to copy it, I'm going to use gsutil cp, which is the copy command, gs colon forward slashes, which is the scheme, and then I will call the bucket name, right? So basically I will paste it, right? And then whatever the name of the object I want. So I want demo.txt. So this is the destination, and then definitely we need the source. So we will copy it, right? Perfect. It got copied. It was 34 bytes. Now I will come here and I will refresh it, and you will see it is there, demo.txt, right? Similarly, if you want to see the files using command line storage, you do gs and then you do a ls on the bucket, and you will see your file there. By default, it shows you the current version. So I'm going to show one very interesting thing. If you do ls-a, which is going to show you all the versions of that, so you will see that there is only one version, right? So this long integer is basically the version. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to update this file, and I'm saying that this is the version 2 of the file, right? And I'm going to write it again by gsutilcp. So you are overwriting that object. If I do a ls now, just a normal ls, I will still see a single version, right? I'm not seeing multiple versions. But if I do a ls-a, I should see two versions of that, because object versioning is enabled, right? So you see two versions here. The one is the older version, one is the newer version. So if you do gsutil cat, which is like the cat command for this file, and I am going to paste this file name again. Okay, my bad. I think I copied it. So I will do that again, or maybe I'll just copy this part now, right? So by default, Google Cloud this shell, it copies whatever you select, and then I'll do a demo.txt. So by default, it will pick up the latest version of that. So it will show you that it is version 2 of that file. But what you can do is that you can provide the version which you want to read. By default, it will read the newer version, but you can provide the version number as well, and it will read the older version as well, or a specific version as well. So that's how the versioning works. But the point is, now you are paying for two versions. So you have 34 bytes and 34 bytes. So you're now paying for 68 bytes by the time the older version is not deleted. And we have configured the older version to be deleted after 7 days. So for 7 days, we'll be paying twice the storage cost, right? Right. Now, since we are in standard storage class, we are not paying to read that data because it is free, which brings us to the next topic, which is the pricing. So whenever we talk about Google Cloud Storage, it is basically a data storage service, but we often forget about that there are other aspects attached with in the pricing part as well. So it's not just the storage price, there is also data processing price, and there is also network usage price. So whenever you are planning to use Google Cloud Storage for any of your use cases, you should pay attention to these two parts as well. So like storage is very, very cheap, but depending on where your data is residing, where you are reading it from, right, you have data processing and network usage charges as well. So do pay attention to that as well. So here we come. So if you come to the storage costs, it's very, very cheap. Like if you are just storing it for in North America region, which is Iowa, you're storing it for in one region only, it's just 0.020 GB per month. This is how much it is going to cost you store the data for 1 month, right? It's damn cheap in standard. And as you move across the storage classes, as I mentioned, if you move from standard to nearline to cold line to archive, the price decreases, right? Similarly, for dual region, it's slightly higher. For multi-region, it is the highest because you get the highest availability and stuff, right? Then there is a minimum storage duration clause, which I mentioned. So in standard storage, if you delete the object for 1 hour, after 1 hour, you will be charged for 1 hour only. But if in Nearline, if you delete an object after, let's say, 1 hour, you will still be billed for 30 days, right? There is an example here, or a deletion example, which you can see and like how it is worked. Next comes the data processing charges. So whatever operations we did on our storage bucket, so we uploaded the object, we did the cat of the object, we listed the object. Each of this is an operation. Each of this is an API call, and the API calls costs you money. Right. So there are three operations, which is class A operations, class B operations, and free operations. So we will see what each what operations are there in each classes. Here you can see the pricing for each of those operations. So this is what the data processing charge is, right? You have stored the data. So if you're not doing anything, if I've just stored my demo.txt and I'm not accessing it, I'm not doing anything, I'm just paying the storage charges. But anytime I'm interacting with that object, I'm going to pay data processing charges as well, which is these class A, class B, and free operations. So here are the prices. You can check it out. Here are the operations. So inserting an object is a class A operations, updating it a class A operations, patching it is a class A operation, setting the IAM on it is class A operation, copying it, listing it, all are class A operations. And then comes the class B, which is getting that object, right? So if I'm basically getting that object via cat or CP, I am in a class B operations, and then deleting that is definitely a free operations. Google is not charging you for deleting that. And then you have retrieval fees. Now, this is an important part. As I mentioned, that as you move across the storage classes from standard to nearline to cold line to archive, you have retrieval charges as well. In standard storage class, you are not paying any money to retrieve the data. In nearline, you pay some money. In cold line, you pay some more money. And then in archival storage, you pay the highest amount of money because it is considered to be infrequently accessed, right? And that's what the expectation is. So if you put a very hot data in archival storage, you are going to pay a lot more in just accessing that data, right? So if you have hot data, keep it in standard storage, add object lifecycle management to basically move the data from one storage class to another, and depending on your organization's need. Next come the replication. So you do pay money for replication as well. As I mentioned, that by default there is replication, which is free. But if you choose an SLA bound replication, which is available for dual regions, you have a turbo replication as well, and there are charges for that. Right. So it's available only in North America. It is not available. Turbo replication is not available in US. So maybe in future, at the time you're watching this video, this might have changed. Right. Now comes the network part. So since your data is stored somewhere in the cloud, somewhere on the server, every time you are getting that data, putting that data, you are basically doing all of that on the network. So there is a network cost attached to it as well. So for example, I'm reading that data from somewhere, I'm writing that data from somewhere. Depending on that, you have network charges as well. So it's a very, very long list. Usually the network charges are free if you are accessing from the same region within the same continent and stuff like that. There are different rules. But if you are moving data between different continents, so for example, I have kept in my demo example, I have kept the data in the Delhi region. It's just one region. But if somebody from the US tries to access that data, I'll have to pay them money for that, right? Because my data is being moved over to the cable to a different continent altogether, right? So that's what I mentioned when we talk about that, whether you should go for multi-region or dual region or a single region. So based on the latency needs and the bandwidth you need, right? So moving data from India to US is going to take some time. So there is obviously latency needs. So you can choose a multi-region. And in fact, even moving from India to even moving from Delhi to Bombay within a single region, or let's say Tokyo to Delhi, it will take slightly longer time. So if the data is available in Tokyo and you're reading it from Tokyo, it will be faster, versus if you have data available in Delhi and you're moving it to Tokyo, there'll be slight latency, right? Although there won't be any money charged from Tokyo to Delhi, although that region dual is not available, but it's just for example, right? So there are money when you move data between different continents. So for example, US to Asia and Europe to South America, from one region to another as well, right? So just pay attention to that. So depending on, so for example, for big data applications, you might have your storage in, let's say, EU region, Europe West 1, but you are processing it in US. That is going to bleed a lot of money for you. So do pay attention to when you create your buckets, like where you'll be processing it, where you'll be, accessing your data from, so that, you do not pay for the access, and also you do not, incur the latency as well. There is also latency aspects attached to it. So that's the pricing part of it. But there is a always free tier as well. So let me pick that out. So yeah, so this is the free tier, and so there is a free tier for cloud storage as well. Yeah, so you have 5 GB per month for regional storage. That is free. 5,000 class A operations are free for a month. 50,000 class B operations are free per month, and 1 GB network egress from North America to all the other regions are are there. And if you see, free tier is only available in US East 1, US West 1, and US Central 1 regions. So if you're using some other region, for example, I'm using Delhi region, it's not free. So I will delete this data because I'm not using it. So it will save me cost, right? But I would have paid, I will be paying money for whatever minutes I have, kept this data here. So I'll delete this so that I do not incur any charges, and boom, I deleted it. Uh, that's how it works. And I will just check if I have any versions available. So I'll do an ls minus a, and I might have some versions available because there is versioning available. So both of the versions will be kept for 7 days, right? This is also one of the neat feature of versioning, that since versioning is enabled, even if I deleted it, I can still restore those versions. So if I have to delete it now, what I'll have to do is that I'll have to do a gsutil rm separately on both of these versions basically. So I will do this, and then I will do a dgsutil on the first version as well. Otherwise it would have taken 7 days for these versions to get deleted. Now if you do a gsutil ls minus a, you won't get any files, right? No files there. So just pay attention. Even if you have deleted your objects from the bucket via the UI, but versioning is enabled, those versions, all of the versions will be kept until the configured time limit. So that's how the Google Cloud Storage works. We are not going to cover like the different integrations as well. I have a video where you can see, which I'll link down somewhere in the show notes or somewhere. You can see like how Google Cloud Storage integrates with how Google Cloud Storage integrates with Dataproc, like how you can write to GCS, and how it is actually very good to store data on GCS to basically isolate the compute and storage. So there is I have a whole course on Dataproc, which you can take if you so wish to. So that's pretty much it for today's video, today's spotlight. I hope you liked it, and if you think I missed something, and if you want me to cover something else about Google Cloud Storage, do let me know in the comment section below. And as always, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, because it really helps the channel. Press the bell icon to get more such content. Peace.